Okay, again, I'm Kamra, and I'm going to speak to you about what we found in a study that we've been conducting at Stanford and what youth think they know versus what they do know. I'd like to thank our funders and state that I have no conflicts. I do get Marlboro ads in the mail, though, because I just like to see what they're doing. And a little bit of a background, but Divya covered this. There was a huge increase between 2017 to 2018, 78% increase. And these numbers represent 1.5 million high school students and about 2.8 million 18 to 24-year-old young adults. And these are all reporting current use or past 30-day use of e-cigarettes. And this increased use has been attributed to, as Divya spoke to us, the stealth of the devices and the high nicotine content. So you can get addicted really quickly, and that's another thing with youth, right? The nicotinic receptors are primed, and you're much more likely to become addicted. Both the style, I was ahead of myself, sorry about that. That's what, and it was the brand Juul. Once it flooded the market, it never went back. So, data on adolescent and young adult use of different pods is necessary for the efficient and effective regulation of e-cigs. And in order to develop public health and tobacco control messaging, we need to get a feel for what this device is, right? Cigarettes, you see anti-smoking ads, and you know that applies to all cigarettes. Not so much with e-cigs. You've got tank devices, you've got the USB drives, and maybe they're all different, and maybe it's water vapor, maybe it's not. And there are no existing studies right now that provided that information. So to determine how and why adolescents and young adults use different brands of pod-based e-cigarettes and how they perceive the associated harms, which is very closely related to the behavior, we asked some questions on our cohort study. Sorry, I'm like all over the place. Anyway. So data derived from the Tobacco Perception Study, which has been a cohort study among adolescents and young adults in California. It was a convenience sample that was recruited in 2014 from 10 large high schools across California with racially, socioeconomically, and ethnically diverse student bodies. And this was wave 8, a special wave primarily focusing on e-cigs, Juuls, other pod brands, and other styles of e-cigs. And these data were collected from January to March of this year. Participants were about 20 years old on the average, and they completed an online survey that was administered by Qualtrics. We had 445, largely female, 65%, and over 1/3 white and 1/3 identifying as Hispanics. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go over our findings and the questions. I figured instead of having measures and then our findings, I would just show the questions that we asked and what we found. So we showed pictures of the devices so that the participants would know what we were talking about. But before we showed the pictures, we asked them, which of these brands have you heard of before today? And as you can see, almost everyone had heard of Juul. There were a few who had heard of MyBlue, Fix, and Soren. Soren is the one that Divya was showing that's an alternative to the USB. Looks like a little drop, but still very easily hidden in one's hand. And of course, if a participant knew of the other brands of pods, they knew of Juul. We asked them, have you ever in your entire life, even just one puff, used these devices? And then we asked them, those who said yes, we asked them how many have you used them in the past 30 days? As you can see, these are the percents. So over 50% of Juul and Soren users reported past 30-day use. So that is a very large proportion of ever users reporting current use for this age group and for e-cigarettes. The previous generations of e-cigarettes, it was a very small, about 20% who reported ever use reported having used in the past 30 days as well. And again, attributing that to the nicotine, most likely. The mean number of days used in the past 30 You can see that Juul is less than cigarettes, which makes sense because it still is the most efficient nicotine delivery system ever made. But the Surin, Fix, and MyBlue more than make up for that. The pods are being used more frequently than the other brands of e-cigarettes. They're a much more efficient delivery system, and as Divya was speaking about, they use nicotine salt-based e-liquids rather than free-base nicotine, which again, don't understand the chemistry, just know that one is better than the other and more popular. We queried, what was the first tobacco product you ever used? And what I find notable here is that Juul's only been on the market since 2015. And the other pods include Surin and Fix and MyBlue and some that we didn't name. Add those to the Juuls, and that tells me that youth who were not susceptible to smoke cigarettes, because everybody knows cigarettes are bad, they were not susceptible to hookah. When the hookah kind of hit the ground running and everybody would go to the hookah bars, they weren't susceptible to that. They also weren't susceptible to trying the old style of e-cigs. But in 2015, they seemed more apt to pick up the habit. And this is just a byproduct. I know it's a very confusing slide, but MyBlue, down there at cigarettes, 20% of MyBlue ever users reported cigarettes as their first product ever used. And what I find notable here is that except for cigarettes, all of the other brands, we were started with the pods as much as cigarettes. And again, just time on the market seems kind of incredible. We asked pod users if they first used pods or first used like third generation tank style e-cigs. And most everybody started with pods, and then a significant amount don't remember, don't know. And that's a very real response in this research, is that they don't know. Do you only use the cartridges sold? Like, do you only use Juul pods? But now they have the copycat pods, but sometimes kids are prone to hack the Juul pods and add the more inexpensive e-liquids that Divya was talking about to their pods. So 44%, we're not sure. And I wonder too, if we gave them the selection don't care, what if that would split up at all. But then followed by brand only and then other types. We asked them, how many days does it usually take you to finish a cartridge or a pod? You know, the part with the e-liquid? I'm not sure. And I think that's funny. And what we did here is we asked this question by product. We asked it for Surin, we asked it for Juul and MyBlue and Fix. Identical responses. There was no need to parse them out into confusing slides because it was just all the same responses. And how often do you share your pod with other people? Same thing. This was asked by product, exactly the same proportions. And it's interesting that they never share the pod. And what would be the reason for this? Because they shared the other e-cigarettes, they shared hookah. This age group kind of, it's a community type of activity, if you will, and they never share. It could be the price point, or it could be what we're finding in qualitative studies, that they just suck on them all day. So how can you share it if you've got it in your mouth all day? Which best describes each product? And this is important for us as researchers, right? We want to be sure that we're capturing what our population is actually doing. And if we talk about vapes, they may not vape, they only Juul. Or, you know, they don't use an e-cig, they use a nicotine delivery system. And you can see there's virtually no consensus on how to refer to them. So we advocate for pictures. Show your participants pictures of what you're talking about that they can refer back to throughout the survey. How much nicotine does this product contain, we asked. Again, you can see there about 30% don't know for the, and looking at the ends for Fix and MyBlue, just take it with a grain of salt because it was a little smaller. But when Juul launched, it was 5%, which would be 5 milligrams per milliliter. And you can see that's the green bar there in Juul. And so there's about 15%, and Surin and Fix is also available in 5%, thank you, and My Blue as well. There's just really no consensus or understanding of the amount of nicotine, and again, I could argue that they may not care. If they have the flavor that they want, at the price that they want, for the device that they want, it'll work. We asked them a comparative question: how much nicotine does the product contain compared to a cigarette, or a pack of cigarettes, excuse me. And again, don't know is a large proportion. And at least they seem to know that it's not less than a pack of cigarettes. That's for the takeaway for me on this slide. And then I use pods because you can see the largest agreement is they're easy to hide. If you go down a little bit, the smell they produce is less obvious, and the aerosol vapor is less obvious. These all, to my mind, speak to inconspicuous stealth using. Followed by, they have better flavors, they're more stylish, and they taste better. So again, we're at flavors which we know are youth appealing, and it was in the deeming rule. The initial deeming rule by the FDA said that we should ban all flavors, including menthol, but it was taken out by the OMB at President Obama's White House, which made me join Twitter, reprimand him, and then completely forget how to use Twitter. Anyways, in sum, 70% of our sample had heard of Juul, and if they knew about other pods, they also knew of Juul. More than 25% reported ever use of Juul, while 25% of the sample, reported ever use of Juul, while less than 25% reported ever use of cigarettes and e-cigarettes. More than 50% of Juul ever users reported past 30-day use, while less than 33% of cigarette smokers and e-cigarette users did. Half of pod users don't know which brands of e-juice they use, the nicotine concentration in their cartridges, or how long it takes them to finish a cartridge. And in the reasons to use, the smallest portions were because they're healthier, because they have less nicotine, and because they have more nicotine. They're it doesn't seem to be relevant, or at least not important to this population. More than 33% reported never sharing their pods, and most use pods for reasons relating to being inconspicuous or stealthy. And there is virtually no consensus on how to describe the different brands of pods. Again, advocate for, in survey research, using pictures. Implications, as Divya said, and as we'll probably keep saying, please regulate e-cigarettes, especially the newer brands, so that we can help protect the health of our youth and young adults. And our findings further support that the regulation of cartridge packaging include some larger statement of the nicotine content and a less nebulous statement than it's addictive, because kids will say, yes, I will be addicted. Yes, I can quit whenever I want. No, I won't be using in 5 years. And that's not a very cohesive understanding of addiction. We need to use the consistent use of product names in research. And there, again, I'm making a call for clear public health messaging to address all manner of vapes. And that is all I have.